Well, 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 it looks like Coyote vs. Acme could actually come back to theaters. For those of you that don't know, Coyote vs. Acme is a movie that was produced by James Gunn and starred John Cena, and was a movie where Coyote was gonna take Acme to court for their explosives not working whenever he's been trying to catch the Roadrunner. It is such a hilarious idea, and it was a huge shame when we found out that this movie got cancelled. Or rather, not cancelled as much as it got shelved by the new head of Warner Brothers, David Zaslav. David Zaslav didn't want to release the movie, and despite the fact that it was complete, he just wrote it off as a tax write-off, and just like that, the movie was never going to see the light of day. Now, other studios at the time were interested in potentially acquiring the movie for themselves. Some of them wanted to put it on their streaming services, and one of them actually wanted to give it a theatrical release. But rather than give a counter-offer, Warner Brothers just straight out denied them, and then just did a tax write-off on it anyway. Everyone was massively disappointed when they heard about this, but Warner Brothers and David Zaslav, they didn't care.
Whatever, I do what I want.
But who would have thought that an up-and-coming distributor who had one of the most ridiculous names and were behind the cheap Hellboy movie would end up being the heroes to many people, because not only did they acquire The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, which most likely would have gotten the tax write-off treatment, but now, based on this Deadline article, it seems that they are trying to negotiate a deal with Warner Brothers to acquire the shelved Coyote vs. Acme movie. This is huge, because we all thought that the book was closed on the Coyote vs. Acme movie, and once Ketchup Entertainment distributed The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, we all thought that, okay, this is not the most terrible of results, but this is not a great result at the box office either. And that pretty much made all of us think that, you know what, I think this is going to be the nail in the coffin for any potential chance of Coyote vs. Acme coming back. But somehow it isn't. It seems that Ketchup Entertainment is not done with acquiring Looney Tunes properties from Warner Brothers, because they got The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, and now they are trying to get Coyote vs. Acme, and according to the Deadline article, it says Ketchup Entertainment is negotiating an all rights acquisition in the $50 million range for the animated live-action hybrid movie. The pact isn't finalized, and there's still a chance it doesn't make, but is heading in the right direction. Should it get over the line, the film would get a theatrical release in 2026. Now, that is the only problem. 2026 is a long time away. We have just started 2025. That being said, that is so much better than the movie being locked away in Warner Brothers' vaults for all of eternity.
Sit still and be quiet in the closet for the rest of eternity.
This is actually really quite interesting. We never thought this movie would see the light of day, especially after it succeeded in being written off as a tax write-off. But it seems that it very much could be distributed. As they always say, money talks. Now, a big question is why? Why is Ketchup Entertainment trying to acquire this movie? Well, honestly, I think this is one of the smartest moves they could have done. Not just because we as audience members want to see this movie, but I mean from a business perspective. This is one of the best things they could have done. Because Ketchup Entertainment, they have had previous releases. They've had Michael Keaton starring in Goodrich, they had a Ben Affleck thriller called Hypnotic, and Michael Franco's Jessica Chastain drama Memory. But who heard of these things? No one. But do you know what everyone did hear about? Hellboy the Crooked Man. That was the first big movie where people heard about it and they were like, wait, what? There's a new Hellboy movie coming out? Then we looked at the trailer and we saw the hilariously titled Ketchup Entertainment, and we all just wrote that movie off, kind of like how Warner Brothers does their tax write-offs. We saw it and we thought, this just seems too cheap, and it seems more like a straight-to-video kind of Hellboy movie, and we all got kind of annoyed how a Hellboy movie was being done this cheaply and was not being taken seriously, especially after it was butchered with the previous movie. So The Crooked Man, it made Ketchup Entertainment a really hilarious name, but it's not a name that anyone took seriously still. If anything, we just laughed at them. But recently, when they acquired The Day the Earth Blew Up, that was a big deal. The movie might not be doing so well, but believe it or not, a lot of people are rooting for this movie. Even if people are not rooting for this movie enough to go pay for a ticket, the fact that a lot of people are talking about it is a huge deal. Even I considered talking about it. Until I found out that the movie was not releasing in the UK until sometime in 2025. But if people are talking about this movie, a Looney Tunes film that we never even knew was being made until just recently, then imagine the kind of great word of mouth Ketchup Entertainment will get if they acquire Coyote vs. Acme, because then they go from that hilarious company that made a cheap straight-to-video Hellboy movie to the studio that saved Coyote vs. Acme, a feat that we thought to be impossible. Because just think about it, no other big movie studio was able to win this movie back, but this newcomer, Ketchup Entertainment, is able to do what the bigger studios could not. That is a huge headline, and that is something that everyone is going to talk about. If this movie does release and people start reviewing it, myself included, you can bet that everyone is going to mention Ketchup Entertainment in their reviews, and it's going to be a huge headline. So just like how A24 and Neon and how all these other smaller distributors get a name for themselves, Ketchup Entertainment is looking to make a name for themselves as well, and I think they have made the smartest decision here, because although they might be a smaller distributor, if they can manage to strike up a deal with Warner Brothers that is within their budget range, then they will be the talk of the town. They'll be known as the studio that resurrected Coyote vs. Acme, the underdog studio that did what the big studios could not. This really is an exciting time. Now, of course, the deal could go sideways, and this could just end up being a non sequitur, but honestly, I think it's in their best interest to actually acquire this movie for the reasons I just mentioned. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and Ketchup Entertainment is taking advantage of it. And even if this doesn't work out, I do wonder, will there be another studio out there, a bigger movie studio, that will see this story and see that Ketchup Entertainment is trying to negotiate an all-rights acquisition in the $50 million range? Will those studios come up and try to pay that kind of money to get the movie? If Ketchup Entertainment can't afford it, I'm sure the other studios would. And whether it is Netflix, Amazon Prime, or any other studio, I'm sure $50 million to them would be nothing. Warner Brothers before were trying to go for a higher amount of money, but now it seems like they're just willing to settle on $50 million. Now, it could be one of those situations where they are giving Ketchup Entertainment a break and they're saying, alright fine, just give us $50 million. Other studios they would have charged more because, you know, they could afford more. But I don't think it is, because if Warner Brothers do want more money from it, I'm sure they could have offered $60 million to another distributor, or to another studio, or to another streaming service like Amazon or Netflix. But the fact that they're not, and they're just saying yes to this, maybe it's just a deal that they managed to do with Ketchup. Maybe there are people in Ketchup Entertainment that know Warner Brothers, or know David Zaslav. Maybe Warner Brothers are just super desperate to get a paycheck. And that's most likely it, because it's well known that Warner Brothers Discovery has a cash flow problem. That's why they were doing all of these tax write-offs to begin with, just so they could get extra money. And seeing as they have lost a bunch of money with Joker 2 and just recently Mickey 17, which seems to not be turning in the box office results that they need, I think they are desperate to sell some stuff and get some capital back, because they still have to spend a ton of money marketing Superman this summer. So that is why I think they are selling this movie, and they are selling it at a lower cost than they originally offered all those months ago. That's what I think, at least. But whatever the reason, like many of you, I am shocked we are even talking about this. This is very fascinating, very interesting, and hopefully this will result in the resurrection of Coyote vs. Acme.